if we generate electricity for 1 hour, then we can supply electricity for about 35,000 households.
It's not happening too much to our environment, but what are the challenges? Why hasn't it become bigger before?
There's no project in the world that has a zero environmental impact. There's always going to be some sort of impact, but you have to look at the impact compared to the benefit that you can give to the environment with this type of project. It's a shame because
You can push it, it's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I would actually join you that day. That's one of my topics. So
let's do it.
Let's do it. There we go. Welcome back to The Switch, not just another podcast, but a podcast that will entertain you, that will educate you and make sure that you keep track of everything that has to do with the green transition. Why do we need a green transition? Well, it's pretty obvious. We need to make sure that we can live on this planet in a healthy and balanced way for a long, long time coming. I'm here in the studio at DNB. If you didn't know what this was, this is the bullshit button. It's what we use when we want to challenge a subject or a person or maybe an initiative. And the amazing button is because we really need to elevate things that are already good. And talking about good, we are having something really not good, but great for you today. Together with me in the studio, I have the CMO and co-founder of Mind Storage. She's an entrepreneur and an investor with experience of scaling several technology companies. She's actually the co-founder of Venesium, and she also co-founded Vendemore, which was the first account-based marketing company in the world, with more than actually 100 Fortune 500 companies as clients, which is pretty amazing. She is also a passionate entrepreneur and investor. So I am very happy to introduce to you today's guest, Anna Engman from Mind Storage. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It is the absolute pleasure. Curious. How did you become interested in sustainability? I mean, you have a pretty tech background and entrepreneurial. What drew you to this?
I think I've always wanted to engage in business that can provide a benefit, not just a business case that's profitable. And the more I worked within tech, I felt like with IT technology, you can do something good for a specific company, usually, but maybe not society as a whole. So in terms of investments, I started investing into green tech companies and felt that, that feeling was a lot nicer than just profitability. And then when my co-founders and I started sort of talking about Mind Storage and the fact that we wanted to start Mind Storage, I just felt like this is a journey that I want to partake in and be able to make a difference.
We're going to talk a little bit more about what Mind Storage is and what you guys do, but It is really amazing. It is a new way of working within the energy sector, I would say. So stay tuned for that. But before that, I know that you're eager to learn more about Anna as a person. Why don't we go into the wheel of questions and see what it has for you?
Wheel of questions. If you could choose to do anything in a day, what would it be?
Ooh. Work-related or personal?
Let's do what's on top of your mind.
Well, I just went skiing and I love being in the outdoors, so skiing for a day is always good. But if I could do something that I've never done before, I think I would like to go to a country where I can work with kids and make a difference during a day. So maybe help building a well or school or something. Maybe a bit cliche, but that was top of my mind.
Not cliche, I don't think so. I think it's important that we, as you started the conversation today about being close to passion and heart, I think that draws out also a lot of commitment and engagement at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. I would actually join you that day. That's one of my
Good.
topics. So
let's do it.
Let's do it. There we go. Let's see what more we have from the wheel of questions.
Wheel of questions. What is your proudest accomplishment?
I mean, I'm a mother of 3, so the kids are obviously up there. But I think from a business perspective, I've had a couple of periods where things have not looked particularly bright in terms of how a business has performed, and being able to turn that around and come back to a positive business space, I think is among it. You mentioned Vendemore. You mentioned Vendemore as one of the companies that I co-founded, and at one point we had no money. I mean, 0 money, lots of debts, and we were close to bankruptcy. And we managed to turn that around and eventually sell the company. So that's one example.
But also a very successful sale, I might add. And also a company that actually formed a lot of the marketing industry moving forward as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. How was that to dark. What was like the thing that made you get up and keep on doing it?
I mean, we never stopped. So we kept on at it the entire time. But I think having our staff believing in the company, despite actually having, bailiffs came into the office and started putting tags on computer screens, and it was really bad. But then at the same time, we were like, okay, we can make this happen, and we just need to keep on aiming to get the deals in, and focus on what's most important.
I think that's very inspiring, and not often stories that get shared. So thank you for sharing that story. I think that's very good for all our viewers and listeners to hear, that even if there is a successful sale in the end, there is always bumps on the road, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, if you look at American entrepreneurs, they're normally quite good at talking about their failures, whereas Scandinavian entrepreneurs tends to be a bit more almost ashamed of having failed once in a while. But I think it's from those types of moments that you learn and that you grow and develop your way of working.
Yeah, let's learn from the Americans in this case.
Yeah,
good. I want to dive into mine storage. Let's start from the beginning. What is it, and what does it do for the world?
So what mine storage does is large-scale energy storage, and with energy storage, most people think of energy storage as something that you use for batteries or devices that aren't connected to the grid. But electricity is really the ultimate fresh produce. You need to produce it and consume it at the same time. And when you have variances in how you produce electricity compared to how you consume it, which we do, then you need to store it somehow to be able to give it back when there's too little production.
Is Sweden a very good? Sweden
is a very good example of that, because we have a lot of hydropower, and the dams that we have in hydropower, they're basically large energy storages, where a river flows into a dam, where we provide a fall? Exactly. A variance to how we want to flow the water through turbines. And that's one way of storing energy, but it's not enough anymore. In Sweden, it used to be enough, but now we need to look at other types of solutions to be able to cope with the new energy era that we're coming into with electrification and so on. What mine storage does is that we provide a similar type of solution, but we use water in mines to store energy, and we use gravity as the means of them providing electricity back to the grid.
It's pretty amazing. First time I heard it, it was like, okay. And then when you watch the movies about how this actually functions, it is actually an old mine and you fill it up with water.
So mines actually water fill once you stop pumping water from it. So in the operational phase of a mine, the mining company pumps water out of the mine every day to keep it dry. And then once a mine is decommissioned, it starts water filling. But it doesn't fill all the way up to ground level. So you normally have a drop of anything from 50 to 100 meters for natural height difference between the water level of the mine and ground level. So we use basically the same technology that you have in traditional pumped storage, which represents 90% of the energy storage that you see today, where you have water at two different elevations. So you normally have a river or a lake, and then you build a dam in a mountainous area, and you pump water up to the upper reservoir when you want to store energy, and then you let it flow back to the river or lake through turbines, and with generators you give back electricity to the grid with traditional pump storage. But that requires natural height differences. So it's really only suitable for certain areas of the world. You have Norway and Switzerland and mountainous areas in the States, but for the flatter regions, it's difficult to use that very well-established and effective means of energy storage. So what mine storage does is that we look for height differences below ground instead of above ground. And then we use the mine as a lower water reservoir, and then to store energy, we pump the water up to ground level. And then you can use either a mining dam that was used throughout the operation of the mine, or you can convert a quarry into an upper dam, because a quarry is basically like a bathtub in the nature. And then you let the water flow back into the mine when you want to release back energy.
Which is, and the amazing thing here is the actual ecosystem of this, because I read that there are more than, how many million? 1 million?
Well,
mines?
I mean, it depends. We don't really know. If you look at one single database called MINDAT, you can see that there's over 1 million closed mines in the world. But that's far from complete.
But let's say that we have half of that. We have 500,000.
Absolutely.
And we make mine storage out of these. What
Well,
can actually that do?
They're not all going to be suitable, but there's more suitable mines available in pretty much every region of the world compared to how big the energy storage requirement is. So it's really the need for energy storage that is limiting the number of mine storages that we can build internationally. And we use completely proven, mature technology. So it's the same turbines and pumps and generators that you see in traditional pump storage that has been around for 100 years. There's big global suppliers that can, ensure a rollout that can actually meet the global demand for energy storage.
To what extent do you think you can meet it?
I think there's many different optimal applications for energy storage, and I'm not saying that a mine storage can provide all the services that energy storage needs have, but we can certainly help with the sort of hour to a couple of day need of energy storage, and also help to maintain our electricity grids at 50 hertz, which is a bit technical but important, because things start breaking if the frequency in our grids deviate from 50 hertz.
So going back, I mean, you're using old mines, using proven technology, but with new ways of thinking and working it. And what you can provide is basically energy. If you look at it from a city, how much would it mean to have one close to where you live?
So our smallest pilot that we're looking at the moment is 15 megawatts. And megawatts is normally one of these expressions that most people don't really comprehend. But if you look at a small pilot of 15 megawatts, if we generate electricity for 1 hour, then we can supply electricity for about 35,000 households for that hour.
That is amazing. That's really cool. Awesome. If I understand you correctly, I mean, what you're building is underground, so it's not in the city, it's not something
No.
you see that is affecting the environment?
Exactly, and the mine is already there. So that environmental impact is already taken, it's done. So what we do is we make the mine into circular asset that can still provide a benefit for society, but then in terms of providing opportunity for energy storage instead of metals. The mine is underground. The actual power station where the pumps and the turbines are, they're also underground at the same level as the water in the mine. So what you see above ground is basically a change in water level in what we use as the upper reservoir. And we're not talking about taking all the water in the mine and emptying the mine completely, and then doing the same when we generate. We don't empty the upper reservoir completely. So if we use, for example, a mining dam, which normally looks like a natural lake, we vary the water level slightly, but we're talking maybe 5 decimeters.
If I would have a house, I would not basically react on it. Is that how I should understand it? Will it disturb me in any way?
Not really, no.
I mean, then the question becomes like, this sounds amazing, and you're using the ecosystem. We are giving another renewable energy source to the market. It's not happening too much to our environment, but what are the challenges? Why hasn't it become bigger before?
So the idea has been around for a few decades, probably longer even. I think we've had a very stable situation in our electricity consumption over many decades. So we haven't really seen a need for introducing new technologies in the same way that we're doing now. But with the two major global trends that are really driving the whole green transition within electricity production is the fact that we need to change fossil-based electricity production to renewables. Fossil-based electricity production actually represents nearly 30% of the CO2 emissions that we see globally. It's
Crazy.
a lot. And here in Sweden, we're a bit spoiled because we don't really have much of fossil-based electricity production, but other countries need to really make a big change. And at the same time, we're electrifying our personal cars. We have heavy transport, the steel industry, where we see a big demand for new electricity. So we need to add an additional, I can't even remember how many gigawatts of renewable storage, but we basically need to increase the amount of renewables by 2040 by 7 times what we're producing today. So that's going to be a major challenge for the grid. And that's where these types of new technologies become current. You can actually build this rather complex infrastructure project today, and it's going to be profitable. Whereas 20 years ago, it wasn't.
I couldn't agree more with you. I do believe that you're right. At the same time, I'm listening to like debates on climate, and the only thing I hear is wind and nuclear as a way of moving forward.
But that's electricity production, and we need wind and nuclear. And it doesn't, from an energy storage perspective, it doesn't really matter how we produce the energy, because wind, you have certain overproduction during, usually in the middle of the day when the wind is stronger, compared to in the evening, the wind is a bit slower usually, and that's when we start consuming more electricity. But you have the same thing with nuclear. With nuclear, you produce exactly the same amount of energy throughout the day. So at night, there's an overproduction, and during the day, during peak hour, there's an underproduction. So we did a study together with some students from Uppsala University that looked at the Swedish need for long-term energy storage, where we looked at a future scenario from the Swedish transmission system operator that looked at both a 100% renewable scenario and a scenario that had more nuclear power. And what we could see was that the need for long-term energy storage is pretty much the same regardless.
To continue on that question, do you know what the needs are?
I think it's difficult to say, because when you do those types of studies, you isolate a country and you don't really count on import and export of energy, which happens in reality. So in reality, I think when we've looked at it from a more, what do we believe is a good number, we have said that in Sweden we would need somewhere between 10 and maybe 20 mine storages to be able to provide a good service to society at large.
Okay, I thought it was even more that was needed, but that's enough.
That's enough, but then I mentioned
combined working with others.
Exactly, and I mentioned that we're building a pilot for 15 megawatts. We're counting on maybe 50 to 100 megawatts of the more large-scale mine storages that we're going to be building eventually.
Inspiring. I'm going to take you back again, because I think it's pretty interesting. I mean, I come from geothermal, and it's basically a little bit the same. It's a proven technology, but there is some like technology advancements that needs to be done. It needs to come in investments in this. Yeah. It's something that people don't 100% understand. So again, going back to what people are talking about, and I say we need wind, we need nuclear, we need everything. But how can we get more attention to like smaller solutions now that can actually make a huge difference later? Where people are so focused on the ones that are already existing that I think feel like, for example, mine storage, geothermal, and others don't get fusion, don't get enough like stimulation and help.
I think you're right, and I think especially when you look at the political discussion, it's very much focused on a few different technologies. It's a shame, because every...
You can push it, it's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So every technology has an optimal application, and I think what needs to happen is that it needs to be more research-based in terms of, okay, how can we provide different technologies at different applications that can be scaled? I mean, if you look at lithium-ion batteries, you talk about, but lithium-ion batteries can provide grid service or grid energy storage. And that's completely true. You can build a battery park that can provide a good service that can be 100 megawatts. But if you look at the global demand for energy storage, for example, there's no way of rolling out lithium-ion battery parks that will meet the global demand, both from the EV industry, from all the other current application that it has today, and to be a grid-supporting energy storage function. There's just not enough of the resources that are needed in those batteries.
Good example of, hey, we're here, we need more different
absolutely.
Sources. You guys have a couple of pilots going on.
Yeah.
What's the next step for you guys? What's happening?
So we have 2 pilots here in Sweden that have come to a stage where we're hoping to start the permit processes here during the spring. And I mean, these are fairly big, complex projects, which means that we're hoping that we're going to have the first mine storage in operation by 2026. But that's getting the first mine storage up and running and operational is a big goal for us. And then at the same time, we're working on how to optimize the actual function of our mine storages, because you can provide many different services, which also means that you can get revenue from many different sources for energy storage. So we're also looking at developing software for how to optimize the trading of this, because it's more of a AI-based logic, not just what the human brain can manage and look at the wind and export statuses and so on. So that's something that we're putting a lot of effort into as well.
When do you think that you will be moving from pilot to like fully operational?
We're looking at mine storage projects in our pipeline that are full scale as well. So we have about 1,000 megawatt hours in our pipeline at the moment. which is exciting. So hopefully it's not going to be a long delay between having a pilot in place and being able to build larger mine storages as well.
Well, that's a bright future to look into. And whilst we're talking about future, let's see if we can get some questions from the future.
Yeah.
Questions from our future.
Who should pay from the better world?
I think that everyone should be paying for this. I think it should be included in the taxes. I think it's difficult to have a situation where politicians talk about change being needed while at the same time designing the markets so that it's difficult for investors to want to take the leap. There's a lot of new technology, not just mine storage, but specifically the more novel technologies, where so much could be done if the funding was more proactive.
I think that that's a really good answer for me.
Yeah,
what would you say to Rory?
Okay. I think that everyone should be a part of paying for this, including the big companies with a lot of money. This should be something that is included in taxes. And then also, I think that the way that investments are being made into big projects that can be a part of solving our climate change, it should be easy for banks and funds to want to pay for them.
So everybody, meaning everyone from a person, from a citizen up to big corporations and organizations.
That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I think it's too important to leave it as an option to pay for a green transition. Because unless everyone is a part of paying for it, it's not going to happen, and then we're not going to have a world to save eventually.
I think that Rory will be happy with that answer, because that means that he doesn't only have to pay what we have actually done. We have to start paying now then.
Yeah.
Definitely. How do you think about like inequality? Should like richer countries pay more, or should we like equally divide the costs?
Of course, rich people should pay more than poor people, and that includes countries. There's no way of expecting a developing country with much bigger social issues to deal with to spend the same percentage of BNP as a country that is already well established, that can bear the cost much more easily.
And I think that even though, I mean, I totally agree with you, and the thing is that if we understand this correctly, I mean, there is a big task for countries like Sweden to push forward and develop and to be on the forefront of this. Going back to mine storage, is Sweden in the forefront in this, or do other countries do this as well, or where are we in the?
We're in the forefront in the sense that, to my knowledge, there is no other company that specifically wants to build mine storage assets outside of Sweden. So we're two companies in Sweden that are looking at this technology. I've seen projects in other countries, but they're not driven by the same type of focused companies. And I think in green tech overall, Sweden we're a role model, which makes it even more important for us to take our global responsibilities. Some politicians talk about the small percentage of CO2 emissions that Sweden represents, but per capita, we're quite high up there, and more than anything, lots of other countries look at Sweden and see how are we prioritizing the green transition here, and that's what then is being rolled out and suggested in other countries.
I think you're right. Maybe there is some investors now in the rest of the world listening to this and like keeping an eye on you. Who knows?
Hopefully.
Well, Anna, this sounds almost too good to be true. So we have to push you into the segment of uncomfortable conversations just to make sure that we understand this.
Uncomfortable conversations.
Are there any risks in working in this way?
There's always risks in infrastructure projects. I presume that you're focused more on the environmental risks in a mine storage project. And a big part of our permit process is to do an environmental impact assessment, which is a big study where you look at everything from how a mine storage project might affect the fauna or the animals, the biodiversity and so on within an area that we build a mine storage in, but also water quality issues. A big part of what we do is we look at the different pollutions that might be in the water from the mining industry. So, for example, a lead mine with lots of lead and maybe arsenic, that's not a mine that's suitable to become a mine storage. But if you look at, for example, iron ore mine, they're usually reasonably clean and they don't have particles in the water that can be a wear and tear for our equipment and so on. So they normally have a better chance of being a suitable mine storage and having a very low environmental impact. There's no project in the world that has a zero environmental impact. There's always going to be some sort of impact, but you have to look at the impact compared to the benefit that you can give to the environment with this type of project.
There's always a discussion about methane leakage. Is that something that you have problems with in this kind of?
It's something that we very much look at. Methane is an explosive gas, so electricity and methane is a bad combination.
Very bad, yeah.
Methane leakage normally comes from mines that have been coal mines. So if you look at the metal mines, it's very rare to have methane leakage, whereas the coal mines, it's a lot more common, which makes coal mines normally less suitable, but you don't have methane leakage from all coal mines. So, but for us, methane is a no-go.
Is it so that the knowledge is so little about these subjects that it, I mean, mining in general doesn't cling very well? It's not something you talk about in that sense. It's not often talked about as opportunities or such like that. Do you think that it has a bad reputation?
Yes. Oftentimes reasonably deserved bad reputation, but then at the same time, metals and the mining of metals is key for the green transition. So stopping mining is not an option if we want to be able to, make this transition work. But I think a lot of mining companies today are a lot more focused on electrifying their production, looking at especially from once the metal is broken in the mine, steel production, for example, which, the electrification of the steel industry has a major impact on CO2 levels globally. So yes, it has a bad reputation, but it can become a lot better, and especially with these different opportunities of making mines a circular asset, where it's not, end of life at the mine and then nothing. Instead, being able to provide a service to society going forward will make a big difference.
That's a good way to end and to summarize this show, really taking care of all the assets that we already have and making something good out of them. Sunshine to you for that.
Thank you.
Who would you like to give sunshine to?
I think we're talking a lot about electrification, but not all industries are able to electrify that quickly. And I think being able to provide green solutions to companies that will have to be CO2 emitters over time to be able to make a slower transition is important. The way that we manage forest today, we tend to cut all the forest down within a specific area, which is a big way of letting CO2 leak from the ground up to the atmosphere. So, for example, introducing carbon credits to the way that mid-size forest owners deal with their forest is a really good way of being able to both provide a bigger biodiversity and less CO2 emittance. So, for example, there's a Swedish company called Forest Carb that deals with this, and I think it's an innovative way of introducing a more environmentally friendly benefit for both the forest owners and the large emitters that are looking to make a change but might not be able to comply with zero emissions straight away.
I think it's important to have all the pieces of the puzzle in the game, and I think that this is a good example. So thank you for shining a light on them. We're coming to an end, Anna, and it's time to summarize. If you would look back to our conversation and so on, what do you want to summarize this with? What do you want other people to remember, and what do you bring with you?
I think the fact that energy storage needs to become a bigger part of the green energy transition that we're seeing. So this is going to happen regardless of whether we as a company succeed or whether how the production mix will look. Energy storage is something that a lot of the politicians have started talking about, but maybe not started acting as much on. So I think, pushing for both the production mix change, but also ensuring that we have energy storage regardless of technology is something that I really want people to understand the importance of.
Well, remember where you heard it. Thank you very much, Anna Engman, for being here with us and talking us through what mine storage does and what it can actually provide to the world.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching and listening. And I hope that you were as educated as I became today, and that you were also entertained under the way. And I hope that you will have a good day. Remember, if you like this episode, subscribe, comment. I would like to talk to you, so you can actually ask some questions and we will make sure to answer them. And also make sure to share, because sharing is caring. And if you know someone who could actually benefit from this episode, do it. Until we meet the next time, take care of yourself. And if you can, someone else. See ya.